Welcome back to another episode of Entertainment Roadmap. Today we are here with Julie Bruns, who she has a very exciting project to speak with us about today. Julie, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well, thank you. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. So this is really exciting. And the story of Ada, which is your short film, was one that I actually didn't know. So this was a very educational film for me, which was super exciting and I learned a lot. But I guess kind of before we get into the questions, how did you learn about Ada and her story? Or if you want to kind
Yeah,
of describe the movie a little bit as well.
definitely. So the movie is based on the true story of Ada Lovelace, who was the woman who wrote the world's first computer program in the 1840s. This is before the first computer even existed. There was a blueprint for a steam-powered computer. It hadn't even been built yet. So it's basically about this woman who has written this computer program using a series of punch cards. Um, Based on this computer that she's imagined what it will do if it's built. And right, the focus of the film is on the end of her life when she knows she's dying of cancer, and she knows she has this very limited window to try to bring this computer into existence. And yeah, essentially, it would have changed the world. Um, so it's focused a lot on her struggles to do that because, of course, this was the 1850s in Victorian England, and female entrepreneurs going, "Hey, I've got a massive investment for you to make in this very science-based, mathematics-based field." It didn't go over super well with her very male possible investors. So it focuses kind of on the frustrations of her dealing with that, and then a very risky gamble that she took to basically try to bring the first computer into existence.
Yeah, I mean, from me and Noah, we were so honored to be able to screen the short film a little bit early, but I was captivated the whole time. And I know Noah felt the same. We were just like eyes glued to the screen, and it had amazing acting in it. It was done well. It was really phenomenal. So that brings me to the question, what's it like to write, produce, and star in a film? Like, you're everything. So
Your mind just kind of is everywhere all at once, all the time. It was one of the first projects because so me and my partner have a history of doing a lot of different projects where we're both writing, we're both directing, I'm acting, everyone's producing. This was one of the first projects that we did that on, and it was one of the biggest and most ambitious. And we also did it as part of a competition called Crazy Eights, where you basically had to shoot and finish your movie and deliver it in 8 days. So, no pressure at all. Um, but yeah, it doing all of those things at the same time, honestly, really comes down to having this incredible team behind you. And as invested as you are in the film and as much as your mind is in it, you can never be everywhere all at once. So knowing that you have, just on Ada, I think probably 100 people's hands touched that film and were part of it by the time it was done. Um, and every single one of them was amazing. So definitely tackling a project where you're doing a lot of wearing a lot of hats, the team is so key.
yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. And I think that wearing all those hats, it's difficult, but in the film, I don't know how to word this the right way. You wouldn't know that you did all of that because it was executed so perfectly. So
True.
everything you did was so perfect, you wouldn't know that you felt overwhelmed.
Oh, that's the key. That's the key. I think it's one of those things where you have to go with the flow and ride the river and just trust. Yeah, trust in the team, trust in the art, trust in whatever magic surrounds film. Because anytime we finish a film, it's like you go, it's a miracle anything ever gets made.
Um, Out of writing, producing, acting, and you've also directed before, is there one that you prefer doing or like that you're more drawn to than the others?
Acting's always been my first love, and just it's the thing that really yeah, has drawn me into film because it's this incredible art form where you get to embody another person and take the time to really put yourself into someone else's mind for a bit. And in the case of Ada, getting to portray this incredible figure and be however small a part of her story is an honor, and that's amazing. That said, love directing, love writing. I think I'm just love storytelling. Producing, it must be done. But yeah, just the storytelling in film is what really draws me in.
Can I ask how you got started with acting and just the industry in general?
Definitely. I came to I came to acting what I consider a little later in my life. I think about 19, and I was living in this small fishing town in Mexico called San Felipe. And there was a fairly good community of retirees. And so there was this little community theater that had been putting on productions in years prior to me living there. And while I was there, it almost got up and running again. They had a play. It was like a fairly ridiculous, fun musical, and I got a fairly significant part of a young woman in it. And I I had my lines like mostly memorized. I was ready to go, and then I realized, oh, I don't think it's happening. The production did not end up going ahead. Uh, but yeah, it definitely, I got bitten with the bug of acting, and it kind of sat in my brain for a few years. I was working in web design and a bit of tourism stuff, and it just never really went away. And then there was a woman, a retiree who lived in San Felipe, who had been an actress in New York, and kind of took me under her wing and gave me a very old, beat up copy of the book Audition by Michael Shurtleff. And that was my first kind of formal introduction to, the world of acting. And so that just started swirling around in my mind. And about a year later, I had all the pieces in place to move to Vancouver and just immediately leapt into classes, leapt into a whole bunch of student films, just anything I could get my hands on to get experience and get to learn how to do the thing.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I just took to it.
Is there a reason that you decided to move to Vancouver rather than like New York or California or somewhere else?
Canadian,
Yeah.
basically. So it's like I feel like if you're Canadian, that's where you get your start, and
hmm
then if you're you make the jump.
Yeah, I'm also Canadian. So, and I'm like Vancouver has so much. I'm not in Vancouver though. Yeah.
Yeah, no, Vancouver, and also after, Mexico was lovely, but like moving back to Vancouver and how lush everything was, it was just like mountains with snow, and like I hadn't seen snow in years, and it's just like,
Mhm.
oh my goodness. So,
Yes.
so that was a treat. Love Vancouver.
That was such an interesting background story. That was actually one of the best that I've heard because it wasn't just like, oh, I wanted to become an actor. Like it was like so much kind of history involved with it and community. I thought that was really interesting. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, for sure. It was definitely, it's extra interesting because I started in this place that just was so, you would think, disconnected from acting, and yet the threads of it still found me.
Yeah. And I mean, becoming an actor, that's really exciting. And it's definitely not the easiest job in the world. There's a lot that goes into that. But then what's it like starring in your own project? So not even in other people's work, but now in your own.
I excuse me. I think it's such a gift and a privilege because it really, for me, it lets me kind of jump right into those roles that I am really, excited and dying to play. I think as an actor, a lot of that process is auditioning and waiting for somebody to go, yes, you're the fit. You are this who this character needs. And sometimes it can be really hard and heartbreaking to not get that call, especially when you've auditioned for a character where you go, I really feel this person in me. Um, and that can be really hard. So having the ability to produce our own projects and for me to sit down and write characters that I I'm excited to play. That's such a huge privilege to just kind of get to jump straight into these characters like Ada, where yeah, these are roles that a lot of actors, spend their lives like wishing and hoping and fingers crossed and working towards. And so it to me it really I feel privileged for sure. Um, yeah. And then at the same time, it's I do absolutely love getting to collaborate with other filmmakers and yeah, I love not starring in my own projects too, because there's such an interesting melding of the minds that happens on those. And coming from being in a project that I produced and have, so much of myself in, it's also a treat to come to somebody else's project and find get to play with that and like find where those two or many creative minds meet. So both are amazing in different ways.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. And I have to ask, since Ada wasn't really like a character you made up, but kind of was, did you find any similarities between her and yourself, or did you write any of yourself into her?
I think we did. So we did a ton of, and my partner Stephen Kammerer did so much research on this character. There's so many little details of the film that he spent so much time making sure were accurate. Even the characters around the dinner table scene, all inspired by real figures of the time. Um, there's a portrait of, so her father was Lord Byron, famous poet. Estranged, they didn't really know each other. She's got a fascinating story. But anyways, there's a portrait of her father that we hung on the wall because in her childhood, her mother had a portrait of her father hanging on the wall, covered with a curtain so she couldn't peek behind it. So we were like, well, what if when she's an adult, she had it hanging in her dining room. So just so many little details to kind of preserve the authenticity of how she existed. That said, I mean, nobody was in that room when, with a camera when those conversations took place. So as a writer, you take the liberty to try and recreate what you think it would have felt like, and also bring a bit of that cinematic flair to it. Um, and being that my partner and I wrote it, I definitely was lucky enough to have a lot of a hand in the dialogue, and I think finding Ada through its like through what it felt like she would have said. I think it kind of was guided by this sense of like, what would she have been feeling, and therefore what would have kind of come from her. Um, but her as a character, that fierce determination to do something that someone has told you are not able to do, that um, rebellion, that absolute conviction in yourself and strength, all of those things are incredible. And I think like I feel like most women, most people have felt shut down at some point by forces out of their control. And so that was very relatable. And her fierce spirit in the face of that was something that I relate to a lot. And I definitely wanted to put that into not just, her dialogue, but also just the way she moves and looks at the people and just the feeling, in the room at the time. So that, yeah, I think that was a melding of my interpretation of how frustrated I would have been in her scenario, as well as what evidence we have of her actual historical story.
All of this is so fascinating, especially because you only had 8 days as well. So hearing all of this, I'm like, my goodness, I don't know. I don't even know how you started. Like my brain would just be like, I don't even know.
Yeah, no, we were lucky. We had several months of pre-production and a lot of time to prepare everything. It was just like as soon as the cameras rolled, it's like the clock is ticking, and from that point, you just don't sleep very much. And we get to the end of the day, some days, and we'd both just sit in the car, me and my partner Steve, and we just kind of be like, I I think it's going well. Is it going well? I can't tell. I think it's okay. Just so exhausted that you're just like everybody seems to be doing fine. let's just keep going and hope it all works out. But yes, sleep
So
is
yeah.
a premium on a film like that.
Mhm. So I feel like producing is kind of the one aspect of making a film that pe most people don't really know about. So what's something that people might not know about producing a film? And was there any like really big decision that you had to make while producing Ada?
Oh gosh, I think producing is, I mean, sometimes you get one big decision, but most of the time I feel like it's 5 million tiny decisions coming at you, in every direction. It's like, this location or that location. Can we have, is there any way to negotiate? Can we have like a candle in a room where just like so many tiny things? And then of course, because directing and acting, they all kind of start blending and overlapping. Um, it's all the questions all the time, all at once. But I think like being a producer, apart from having a really good sense of, the budget of the film and how to put it to the very best possible use, and kind of the spidey sense you get around that, is this big blend of really good people skills, because there's so much that you can do when people support you, and finding people and establishing those relationships where people want to be a part of something like that is a huge part of indie filmmaking, especially when you don't always have the money to be like, yes, just spend the money, close the thing down, we'll do it. It's about, who can I connect with, share the vision, hopefully inspire them to let us, create. That's a huge part of producing. Um, Dealing with money, dealing with people, being quick on your feet too. A lot of these decisions come in and it's like yes or no, and I need this decision 5 minutes ago. And so having the ability to do a quick judgment in your head and come to a conclusion that you are relatively comfortable being sure about, very quickly, is a big skill as well. And then also just kind of as a producer too, the director holds the whole story in their head and kind of like guides that part of it. As a producer, you kind of hold all the moving technical parts, like are we making sure that we've got everything we need when we go to distribute? Are we, sure that we're where's our market? What are we doing to like make sure that we capture them and get the film seen by the people who will care about it? How do we make sure we're not going over budget and not all going to be in debt after this is over? Um, what do we do if something catches on fire? It's figuratively or literally. It's kind of you're a fixer, you're a therapist, you're all of those bits and pieces, the gum that holds the film together.
Yeah, and I mean, you kind of touched on a really interesting topic, which was the film getting distributed. So what is it like to get your short film distributed like Ada will be in the upcoming weeks?
It's very exciting when it happens. I think everything up to that point can be a little bit tedious, where you're kind of trying to find the right home for it, trying to make sure that you have all of the assets figured out. I think I spent a couple of days trying to figure out some codex things, and just there's a lot of like technical requirements, and making sure you have the right materials when you go to distribute a film, and you don't get caught in a spot where it's like, oh, I wish I had, done stills differently, or you know, I should have asked my editor to do XYZ with a certain export at some point. So there's a lot of like technical, like hindsight 2020. But the actual process of being distributed and getting a film out, I mean, for me, it's such a huge thing, because my favorite place to be is on set. My favorite thing to do is create a film. But there's something, we all, when we create these things, we do it because we want to tell a story, and being able to, it's always more exciting to tell a story to a room full of people than just to yourself, quietly off in a corner. So distribution is that mirror half of a film, which is the audience and their experience with it. And I feel just incredibly lucky to have gotten distribution for Ada on such great platforms and feel like, oh, it's going to be seen by people who I think, yeah, will really enjoy it.
Yeah, and are you allowed to share which platforms it will be on for our viewers?
Definitely. It is up on Real Women's Network, and it's going to be on Shorts TV in a few weeks.
Congratulations, that's so exciting.
I'm
So for,
I'm
so for that, is it that they watch your film and then they reach out to you to say that they want it on their platform, or do you have to submit your film to these platforms that you want it to be on?
Yeah, I mean every process is a bit different. In the case of Real Women's Network, we had a previous relationship with them, and I have a couple other films on their platform, which is fantastic. They've been absolutely lovely. Shorts TV, we submitted that film, but had met some of the reps from Shorts TV at previous film festivals we'd done. But there's also a lot of different routes. There's to go through with distribution. There's Film Hub, which a lot of people use, where it's basically an aggregator. You put your film up, and various streamers and platforms can take a look and kind of, yeah, basically find it or watch it and reach out to you through Film Hub. And then there's a lot of distributors who just have a form on their website, especially for shorts, saying, "Hey, send it along, and let's see if it's fit." So yeah, that process is varied and takes a bit of patience and finding the right fit.
For sure, yeah. Oh,
Oh, yeah.
I'm so sorry. I don't know who asked the last question.
And I asked it.
Okay, sorry about that. We'll edit that out. What do you hope that people take away from Ada, especially since it's such a historical film and I think it has such a powerful message?
I mean, I think one of the biggest things that I just hope that people take away is more knowledge of who Ada was. And to me, it was always a big part of why we chose to make the film was we were both shocked that neither of us had known about her. Um, I worked in web design and like computer type fields before coming to acting, and wasn't aware that Ada was basically the mother of computers. Steve, my partner, huge history buff, knew a lot about Lord Byron, her estranged father, but hadn't had only kind of brushed against the knowledge that Ada had existed. And so we actually found the story of Ada more or less together. We were doing he was doing some research on something else, and Ada came up, and I kind of was like, whoa, and we stopped for a minute and just investigated her because it was such an anomaly that it feels like she should have been like an Einstein figure or an Edison, type figure where you're like, or Tesla, where it's like, oh yeah, of course I know that name. That's Steve Jobs level of like fame, or even Alan Turing, who discovered her notes 100 years later, and that's what he was using as partial inspiration for actually building the first computer 100 years later. So for us, I think making this film has really been about bringing her story more to the forefront where it deserves to be. And the number of people, we did a film festival in Silicon Valley, home of like tech, just so much yeah, technology gets birthed there, and we did a panel, and a lot of people know about Ada there because there are buildings, named after her there. She's a figure at the forefront, but a surprising number of people didn't even there. And it was like, this is kind of a travesty that nobody knows about her. So yeah, even from when we first discovered her story that one day, I think we both were just like multiple times had exclaimed, "How is there not, a movie that really explores her life?" And we repeated that to each other throughout the years until Crazy Eights came along. Um, and I think I vaguely remember there being an afternoon where once again Steve was on the couch going, "How is there not a movie about her?" And I was like, why don't you pitch something to Crazy Eights? Why don't we do it? Yeah, and so that's kind of how it all came about. And yeah, I hope that awareness of her name happens. I hope that people see her story and are inspired and reminded that, there's always been a place for women in tech. We started it apparently. So I hope it's inspiring to young women looking to get into STEM. I hope that it's an inspiring story for women just trying to do difficult things anywhere, because just because you encounter people saying that you shouldn't be able to do it has no impact on whether you're actually able to do the thing.
Definitely. And I think, I mean, I personally, I don't know about you, Noah, but I didn't know who Ada was before I watched this film. And I'm very into computers. So I was just like amazed that I had never learned about her in school. I had never just even heard the name. And then just everything that she came up with was crazy. Like her mind, so powerful.
Oh, if they'd have given her money, we wouldn't recognize the world right now, quite possibly. Can you imagine having 100 years more of computers?
No, that would be insane.
Yeah, I didn't know about her either until watching this short film. And I talked about it with one of my friends. He's in software engineering, so he works with computers like in school. And even they didn't even learn about her in school. And so I think this film is really inspiring, not even to just women, but just to everybody.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh,
And do you have any fun stories from filming that you're able to share?
oh gosh, apart from being just deliriously tired. Um, I suppose it's fun after the fact. So I had a period specific corset on the whole time. Which was very exciting. I was like, I was like, I want to have this. I want to have the movement of, be period accurate, because it changes the way you feel and move and stuff. So it was very fun the first day. And then I realized around lunchtime that I was not able to bend. So rather than sitting down, I kind of just leaned against a wall. Um, and it was laced quite tightly because I was sewn completely into the dress. Every morning they just sew me into my costume. And you'd work all day and you get a break for lunch. And by then you're starving, so you're like, oh yes, food. And I, in this corset, ate too fast and realized that all the food just stopped just above it. Just kind of wanted to stay there. And it was like, oh, it's gonna be a smoothies for lunch situation the next few days. Um, so the corset I was happy that I did it, but it was also kind of one of those like, okay, let's make adjustments for how we do this. If in retrospect, in the future, I will do it slightly differently. Still do the corset, but maybe not be quite so ambitious with like, yes, definitely, let's have the fit be hourglassy. um, but yeah, it was a fun shoot. We had this lovely old house in Delta, um, and we've set the movie in London, and we've filmed it in British Columbia in February. And as may sometimes happen in Canada in February, we got hit with a snowstorm on the last day of filming. And thankfully we were all inside, but every once in a while we'd kind of peek out the window and it was a blizzard. We had, 3 feet of snow or something crazy just dumped while we were filming the last scene. So we finished the film. Thank goodness we weren't outside. Everybody went out to their cars and it's like, okay, how are we getting home? I'm pretty sure everybody else managed okay. And then when it came to us, we ended up getting stuck in a snowbank and had to call AAA to get right. It's like, oh well, at least we don't have to worry about getting back to set early. So we were able to get to the edit suite a little bit later the next morning after dealing with the car. But what an ending to a crazy 3 days of filming. Was like, we're stuck in a film. We're stuck. We're stuck in a snowbank, but we're done. We're both just so exhausted at that point. We're just
Isn't
like,
Isn't that how it always works though? Like I don't know. I'm from New Jersey, so we haven't been getting a lot of snow, but you never get snow when you want it. Christmas, it's never white Christmas, all of that kind of. And then you have something important happening. Like the day of my surgery, I had a huge snowstorm to the point where I could barely get to where I had to go. And it's just insane how timing works out like that. But it's funny to hear that you couldn't even tell, like, obviously, with the filming that it was snowing. So it's fun to hear those little stories.
We lucked out that our one outside shot we shot the day before. So I feel like, yeah, I feel like I've been blessed with like really good timing for certain things during filmmaking. It's always like right afterwards that it's like something just falls apart. You're like, right, lucky us.
I made a short film with my friends once, and it was also in the winter a few years ago. And I'm in Montreal, and it's like we had a scene that was supposed to be filmed outside, but it started snowing. It wasn't supposed to snow, but it did, and we had to reschedule like everything else because we didn't want it to be like pouring, like blizzarding while we filmed that scene. And that was stressful. We weren't like a huge crew because it was kind of just for fun, but still stressful.
Oh, that there's where the producer jumps in and goes like,
Yeah.
okay, we balancing around things, or are we suddenly like, oh, production value jump,
Yeah.
snow now.
Also, did you have a dialect coach on set for the accent?
So funny enough, I did do some dialect coaching because I was very specific in that I wanted not just a British accent. I went to a Lambda briefly in London, so I was lucky enough to kind of have had time testing my accent out on my classmates and making sure it worked. But I did do dialect coaching for Ada just because I wanted specifically that region of London and that time period. We went very overboard with authenticity. I think being this was our first period set film. Um, so I did have a dialect coach, but he was not on set with me. However, a good friend of mine who also did Shakespeare in London, and so therefore had an excellent work on the accent. Actually, was playing Grieg. John Emmett Tracy was there, and I think there were a couple times he ran over and went, you know, make it more posh, make it more of this. You know, it was fantastic. So very supportive team. Yeah, I can't praise the team of that film
Yeah, and
any
then
possibly anymore.
no, it seems like they were all phenomenal. And then I think my last question for you is, how did you find such authentic costumes in such a short period of time?
So the costuming was part of the pre-production that was able to be done outside of the 8 days. My costumes were mostly hand made by our costumer Hayden Kruger, who actually won a Leo Award for those. So yeah, he would. I have a behind the scenes photograph of him sewing me into the dress in the morning, and then a lot of the men's costumes we went on a fairly exhaustive hunt of a lot of the costumes shops and stuff in Vancouver. We're lucky that there have been a lot of period set films. There had been right before us, I think. What had filmed? There were a couple that were like fairly close to that era, so we were able to kind of piggyback on like, oh, all their old costumes and stuff. So yes, but yes, we had a bit of extra time to pull together the costumes and the set deck and the location and everything. Yes, I distinctly remember just a lot of visits to many antique stores to find very authentic pieces. Even the glasses on the table during the dining scene, all but one were authentic antiques from the 1850s. And the one that I stand up and hit with the knife and to ding 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 and get everyone's attention was a stunt glass that they flew. They'd be like, hold, and they'd replace the glass. And it's like, now you can hit it with a knife, not an antique. But I found that very amusing.
That's insane. And to hear the dress was handmade, that's like beyond comprehension for me because I think I'm the furthest thing from a fashion designer that could be, but that awesome. And it looks so professional and it looked literally like you stepped right out of a Hollywood wardrobe. It was phenomenal.
Thank you. Yeah, our costumer and team did just an incredible job. And yeah,
Yeah.
it takes a million hands to just put all of those touches into a production like that, especially a period piece where it's everything has to be transformed. And we actually had an incident not to do with costumes, but with we didn't cover the light switches in the location. There a couple of them, and so there were a couple of light switches where it just was like hours and hours spent afterwards just removing them by hand in post. Fixing post is not the ideal, but huge thank you to Dave Titus who painstakingly fixed our mistake.
I had a teacher once, like for a film production class, and he showed us a film he made like years ago. And he had left a water bottle in one of the shots that he filmed. And they didn't realize until they were screening the film when it was all done. Like nobody had noticed it. So there's just still a water bottle in the shot.
He
And
gamifies
I'm
it.
exactly. Yeah.
It's
I
just
mean, it happens.
just a trend. We need to start doing it on purpose as like a
Yeah.
stylistic thing. When we make a
Hmm.
mistake, like, yeah, no, on purpose.
Yeah.
It's a symbolism, light switches that electricity was coming.
Hmm.
She was ahead of her time. She had light switches before everybody else.
That's funny. Yeah. But Julie, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. This was such a great conversation. And do you have a date for Ada's release on the streaming platforms?
Thank you so much. So it is currently up on Real Women's Network. You can go and either you can subscribe to the platform and watch a variety of films from a ton of amazing female filmmakers, or you can also just buy or rent Ada itself separately. And then we should be up on Shorts TV very soon, I think probably earlier mid-March.
Awesome. And when you have the links to everything, make sure to send them our way and we'll post them along with your interview. So thank you
Definitely.
again so much. This was such a great conversation and we had such a great time.
Thank you so much. It's been such a wonderful time being here.